Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely brimming with excitement to welcome Ben Liebus to the show. Ben is the founder of Mob Kitchen. Mob Kitchen is an online cooking and content platform whose mission is to help students and young professionals prepare restaurant quality meals on a budget and learn more about food and drink and culture. In 4 years, they've amassed a mob and a cult-like following of die-hard fans. I think it's 1.25 million across all platforms, which is just absolutely insane. 4 best-selling cookbooks: Mob Kitchen, Earth Mob, Veggie Mob, Speedy Mob, and soon to be Comfort Mob. You've got insane number of projects. You've worked with Wagwan, with Samsung, in the process of building an app. It's absolutely insane. So thank you so much for coming on today, Ben.
Pleasure. Yeah, really happy to be here.
The first place I want to start is from the outside looking in. You've kind of built this content juggernaut that just seems it's just charged onto the food scene at like this ferocious pace, and it is absolutely insane. And one thing I saw, and it was an Instagram post. I think it was in March 2021, and I was like, this actually makes me realize that Ben is actually human, which is insane. And it's talking about, I'll just quickly read here. It says, this was in January 2017, so 5 months after the mob had launched. We'd uploaded our first batch of videos and had just run out of content. Although it was a small following, it was much slower than I'd hoped, and it wasn't going to plan, not even close. And you're talking about getting investment here. And it says the talks went on for a month over Christmas. I could hardly sleep. It's all I could think about. It felt that the only way Mob Kitchen was to survive was to get this investment. And on these texts to your mate, I think it's Tommy, you say, fuck, Jesus, this is unbearable. And lots of the listeners to this show are gonna have to go through a point of like absolute despair to propel themselves forward. I think the best place to start is kind of set the scene for listeners. Like, where were you when you were sending these texts to your mate Tommy?
I was so it was 4 months into starting Mob, and I'd graduated, shot 20 videos with a couple of mates I was at university with, spent my whole startup budget on those videos and the initial branding, which came to about just under 1,500 quid. And the idea was that with those first 20 videos, we had to get the platform to a point where it was going to be big enough in size that it was going to represent a kind of sponsorable opportunity to brands, and thereby sort of kickstarting the revenue flow, which we would then put back into Facebook advertising, which would result in more revenue coming in from brands, and that kind of cycle would begin. And by the end of 2016, we'd expended our first batch of content, and I didn't have any money, and the platform also wasn't at a point where we could, start charging for content to brands. So the options really were to find someone who sort of really believed in like the core idea and ask them or try and get them to invest, either, by letting us work in their studio or with cash. And there was this one conversation that came up, and I'm sure you'll actually probably know of the guy who the conversation was with, even though I'm not going to name him on this, but he's a big dog in the kind of branding and marketing world. And he kind of heard about the idea, and he said he was interested. He said that he was interested in letting us use a tiny little kind of kitchen studio space that he had in his office in London on Saturdays, and in return he'd want 50% of the business just for letting us do that. And there wasn't a business sort of 3 months in. It was there was a Facebook following. And it's an interesting thing with followings. So I think people think that the business behind them is much bigger than it actually is. But there was a Facebook following, and it was nothing. So I was very ready to give away that 50% for that offer. And the conversation started sort of, I think it was at the end of December. So there was this 2-week period over the Christmas break, and then into the first kind of 10 days of January, where everyone's kind of getting ready for the rest of the year and, making their plans. And I was sort of really on this cliff edge. I was at home with my parents, which I feel very privileged that I was able to do, but that's where I was living over this period. And during those 2 weeks, it was really this idea of like, this guy's either going to do this and I'm going to be able to carry on, giving this a crack for another 5 months, or he's not. And we're completely screwed, like completely screwed without any real options. And so I just remember sort of, you know, every day I was waiting and I was checking my phone and I was checking my email. You know, this was also right back in the day where, you know, I was getting sort of like one email through to my like mob company email address, if that, every day. And it was just like very sparse and barren. And yeah, and I remember, and then you know, I waited for 2 weeks. All of those sort of texts that I shared were kind of in the run up. And then on the day, I remember an email came in that was quite cryptic and made me think, I think that this isn't going to happen. And so I sort of went into crisis mode, messaging all my mates, messaging Tommy. And then I remember I'm getting chills actually recounting this. So I remember clear as day, going at about 6 p.m. It was dark, so it was winter. And I got a voicemail from the person that worked for this guy. And I knew that this voicemail was going to contain the final verdict. And so my mum and dad were in the house. I decided to go outside, sit in my car, opened up the car, got in the car, played the voicemail. And she was like, you know, we're so sorry. It's just not something that we've got scope for at the moment. And you know, I'm sure mob this, I'm sure mob that, keep trying this, keep going for that. And I broke down in like probably the most like full way I've ever broken down in my life, completely like shaking, uncontrollable, like heaving, sobbing, crying. Because I thought, I couldn't see a version of events. My dad's a very pragmatic man. He ran a restaurant for 15 years. So he's very, very supportive now, but while I was living at home, he was constantly questioning the idea, constantly questioning whether it could go ahead, and questioning, you know, whether it was the right thing for me to be spending my time doing, especially 4 months in. He was very worried. And so I also had this sort of like dynamic with him that I was aware of, and that I knew that I was going to have to go back in the house and say, this is all fallen through.
And how did that conversation go? So you got out your car and like,
so I, you know, yeah, got out the car, came in, you know, I think he really was quite standoffish when it was happening. So I got in and you know, he realized, and I think, you know, they were sort of, mum and dad were saying, you know, it'll be okay. But he was really kind of, you know, I think I remember him sort of almost latching onto it and saying, you know, I think, you know, probably not in that exact moment, but, you know, day after, saying, I think this is probably the time to like think about, you know, either exploring this very much on the side and like, you know, pursuing something else, you know, whatever for your main thing. And yeah, and then, you know, luckily, so I say all was completely lost. We had my one final stab was also my oldest friend, Rupert, who I went to school with when I was 5 years old. We were the two newbies in our primary school, and so we'd always sort of been quite connected. And our birthdays are 1 day apart. And he's a cameraman, and he worked for a camera production company that had lots of kit, and he said, I can come down and I can film a couple more videos with you, and I've got the kit to do it. So the next day he came down and we filmed 4 videos together, and we completely changed up the style. I taught myself how to edit over the last couple of months. We changed up the style and they started doing better. And I mean, it definitely wasn't, there were lots more hurdles along the way, and it wasn't like that was the moment, but it definitely, with the new videos, we picked up a bit more traction. But I mean, it was such a low moment. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think like, especially with social media, and I also sometimes feel quite guilty about, you know, when I post about the kind of the great things that are happening with Mob on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I think that it can give off this image that it's all great all the time. And that can be the downside of social media, because I think often what you don't see are those, you know, for me, 1.5 years of like, this actually isn't happening and this isn't working, and like staying awake all night, like terrified that it's not going to work out, because it's real. And I think it does, you know, I'm sure, you know, there have been similar moments at Manny. So
Yeah, no, I mean, fundamentally, I've just come to accept that, social media is just a highlights reel. And as soon as you accept that, but I do think, and that's why I love that post, because it shows the, the reality of things. And I think it really struck a chord with me. I think in terms of, for listeners who, no matter what startup they're doing, they're going to have that moment of despair. And I think if you can cultivate that moment and actually use it to propel you forward, as you did with Rupert, it can be really powerful. What advice would you give to people who are going through like a moment of, fuck this kind of thing? Is there anything you could talk to on that?
I guess in that moment you're forced to really look at what you have, and I sometimes the reality is that, and I know a lot of people who, a lot of our contemporaries in startups and founders, and they've had a couple of shots at a couple of different things that haven't quite worked out, and I think definitely in those moments of true despair, I think it is important to look at what you've got and really seriously think, like, am I completely and utterly invested in this? But if you do look at what you've got and you truly believe in the core, then I mean, my approach, and I sort of love the image of that, like, mob has almost like bludgeoned its way into like the food content media space. Like, that was my approach. It was, I looked at what I had, I truly fundamentally believed in it, and I just had, a thing in the back of my head that was just like, I'm going to do absolutely fucking anything to make this happen. Anything. I'm going to, have my relationship with my dad sort of fall to sort of tatters over the next few months. I'm going to close myself off from the outside world. I had zero social life for a year. I invested everything I had, all of my energy into it. And I would not stop, and I wouldn't let go. I think that is that's the advice, like true, utter grit and determination.
No, that's amazing. I've got goosebumps listening to that. But did you have like a vision? Like, did you have your vision written down? Because I know you write a lot of notes. I use Evernote as well. I'm constantly writing down ideas. Like, did you have that like on a board, or did you say like, this is where we're gonna fucking go? Like, how did you cultivate that drive and keep the fire alive, I suppose?
I mean, I think right from the off, I was very secure in the knowledge, and I knew that there was not an online space, an online food space catering specifically to young people in the UK. There just wasn't. Jamie wasn't doing it. BBC Good Food wasn't doing it. This was sort of actually mid 2016 was actually just before the real kind of like surge on Instagram. So there weren't these kind of Instagram foodie pages really that people were following. There just wasn't anything there. So I mean, right at the beginning, I was, the name was Mob Kitchen, and the tagline was "Food You'll Actually Cook," and the kind of the first series was "Feed four for under a tenner." And I believed in each of those things truly and deeply, and so no, I mean, I don't, it wasn't kind of written up there, but it was firmly embedded in here, in my belief in the fact that it was, that those things were unique, and that there was a gap, and that mob occupied that. And so yeah, but I think definitely sort of, having a mission statement, either if it's in your own head or on notes, or like where you can like refer back to it, and just and it should be, I think it also should be, I love your tagline on LinkedIn, and I think it's like that just like simplicity, and like, I sell exquisitely delicious peanut butter to diehard raving fans. I think like simplicity in like one sentence, like one core mission statement that you pile all of your belief and sort of put all of your energy in getting behind.
Oh, 100%. I think, yeah, you've got it. And that's, as you said, kind of bludgeoning your way through on social media. I had that kind of belief when I was out on the road driving around in like a peanut butter Peugeot, essentially just getting rejection after rejection, like barrages of it, going to these farm shops. And I think once you've actually got that, it actually becomes quite easy. It's just the hardest thing is drilling so deep internally to know what that is.
Mhm.
I want to fast forward now to 2021. When something does go a bit Pete Tong or a bit like, you've now got a team of 50 or soon to be 15 that you now look after. Like, when something throws you off kilter 4 years down the line with a bit more experience, like, how do you remain more, well, pragmatic, as if that's something your dad's taught you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of, I think I've probably taken a step away from the kind of crisis fight or flight mode mentality that I think you are definitely hit with more in the early days when something goes wrong. I am I'm a sensitive guy. I'm an emotional guy. I know, when things do go wrong, they do kind of like affect me. But, I definitely have, taking a pause, making sure you consult other senior members of the team, especially both, Joe Glick is a guy, he invested 20K in Mob about a year and a half in for 10% of the business. And
Joe Glick. You said
Joe
Joe
Glick,
Glick.
yeah. And he is he's our only investor. He's only about 6 months older than me, but when you talk to him, it sounds like you're talking to a guy who's spent 50 years in business. So I speak to him for advice a lot. Our brilliant ops director Michael, who I talk to all day every day. So I think bringing other people in, making it more of a conversation when things go wrong, not having this kind of like instant kind of panic modes. Yeah, I think that I've definitely like matured in that respect to responding to things, when they go wrong, just not kind of having this kind of crisis attitude.
No, likewise, I have to kind of journal it out and then approach it. So Joe Glick, what does he do? Is he in food and drink, or is he?
No, so he started an app called Raffler, which was back when I was at university, it was an app where it went mega viral for about half a year, and like the idea was you download the app and then you watch 2 adverts on the app, and then you're entered into a prize draw to win like 50K or something.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it was this really cool app. Well, it wasn't 50K, it was like 5K, and like there were all these raffles every day, and I think they ended up giving out like almost £500,000 worth in prizes in the time they were on the App Store. And then they had a team of 10 people working in an office in Old Street, and then they got ripped off the App Store without a second word from Apple because there was something in what they were doing that wasn't quite in line with one of Apple's new kind of gambling guidelines. And the business was over. So, I mean, it was sort of like, for him, it was like a huge lesson, and like just like a tragic thing actually to happen to like a really young, thriving business. I can't imagine if something like that happened to Mob, but he is, I guess, like through all of that, he's incredibly wise when it comes to business. And we were at a pub about a year and a half into Mob, and we just like really, really hit it off, connected, went out for dinner. We needed 20K to buy all of our kit for our first studio setup and like put down the first few months rent in our studio in London. And he had the cash, and so he just put in 20K, and I gave him 10%. And
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, I think we all need mentors, or like people just to bounce ideas off. What would you say is kind of the one critical thing Joe's taught you, like, over the last couple of years?
Oh God. Oh God. I mean, it's sort of endless. I mean, he's listed as I think it's a self-appointed title actually, because I don't think I ever quite said this to him, but I think he's listed as like strategy director on LinkedIn for Mob, and he is just that. I mean, he's like every single new and it's sort of interesting having a mentor, because I would sort of describe him as a mentor actually. I call him do it for anything, and it's sort of odd having a mentor who's only about 5-6 months older than me. But no, any new strategy, any new vertical within the business, which is sort of the direction I think Mob seems to be taking, is that we are this media platform, and that we're sort of branching and weaving into all these different areas. And he kind of sits over a lot of that. And I don't have a single golden nugget right now. I'll think of one and send
Yeah,
it through.
no.
But it's kind of an overall general, and he's always available on WhatsApp and on the phone. And it is like, yeah, it's like immeasurably reassuring and steadying and like calming as well. He's very calm and pragmatic.
Calm.
Yeah. And I think that's what my dad is as well. And even though at the beginning the relationship with dad over the business was tricky, my dad is very calm and pragmatic. And I, as a, can be emotional and sensitive guy, I need those kind of, really like steady, calming presences in my work life to kind of counter that.
Completely. And that's like Louise, our sales director, my mentor. She's completely just calm as ice. No, cold as ice, calm as ice, whatever. Specialist. Yeah. But yeah, and I'm like that. I'm quite, constantly trying to do things, jump around, and having something to bounce ideas off is so invaluable. Kind of on the projects front, I think I'll jump here now. Is as I said, outside looking in, you've built this juggernaut that just seems to just basically do everything. It's like the mob is just spreading into all sorts. I've got a little list here of I think you did the mob kitchen essentials, which is like your kit for students, the mob truck, mob spices, Friday giveaway. You've built an app, books, partnerships with Wagwammers. I mean, hours of content, YouTube channel. At Moneylife, we believe like that our kind of strategies do less better, which is like almost try and focus, like don't get distracted. And I love speaking to other founders who have different strategies. Like, what is your filtering system to say either like fuck yeah or fuck no to a project when like how do you do that?
I don't know. I mean, really, I guess it's at the whim. I think I'm like at its core, over and above food. I'm just like, I love business, and I love it. It is the creative side of it, the ideas side. It's like what gets me up in the morning when I latch onto a new idea with Joe or with Michael. Like, it feels like I've been injected with a shot of adrenaline. Like I like live for it. I hate the weekends. On Sunday evenings, I'm like literally buzzing to start working again. Find holidays difficult. I just live for it. And and so, and I guess part of that is I constantly am thinking of, with the team and with Joe and with Michael, thinking of new ideas and new verticals. And yeah, I mean, I guess,
Sorry, when you say sorry, just interrupt there. When you say verticals, apologies for my ignorance, you mean?
I guess like new verticals within a vertical within a business is like, if we're a media platform putting out content, a new vertical within that business might be a grocery range under the Mob Kitchen umbrella, or a management company under the Mob Kitchen umbrella, or an app under the Mob Kitchen umbrella.
Right. Cool.
So all those new ideas, I guess it's a wanky business word for like ideas probably. So there are, and so we're always sort of thinking about these new ideas. And I guess it really just comes down to I don't know. We always test things on the platform. We put the ideas out. We sort of like, we either ask the mob about their thoughts on the ideas, or we try and test it in like, we try and test it in its like most nascent phase as possible before like really expending too much time and resources into something that might eventually not work. But I think, my approach has been, I don't know what, I guess maybe a bit different to kind of few, but nail it, has been just kind of, I go at 1,000,000 miles an hour and I love trying things. And like, I think one really interesting, my best mate is Misha Metcalf, and his dad is Julian Metcalf. And one really interesting thing that he told me that one of their team at Pret said about Julian is that he comes up with like 100 ideas that are like properly awful, but then he has one, and they try all of them, but then he has one idea that is like completely and utterly groundbreaking. And whether that's like, you know, he was the first guy to do like popcorn in a bag, and he was the first guy to put spinach and a boiled egg in a pot. He like comes up with these like iconic ideas. And I guess I sort of see myself, you know, I see at least my approach to him, you know, fairly similar, like in that, like, you know, we have this amazing platform now, and it does allow for us to kind of explore lots of different routes and avenues. And yeah, that's our kind of approach to it. But I guess, like, you know, importantly, we go into all of those ideas, not being too precious over them, you know, making sure that we make a decision quite quickly as to whether it's working or not, trying to test it in like a least expensive way as possible. But I think that that's something, you know, that kind of like energy and that kind of like trial attitude, I think is something that people really connect with the Mob platform. It's like, you know, we don't spend sort of 6 months making sure that like one thing is completely perfect. Like Mob is rough and ready and like a bit messy, and like some things work and some things are a total flop. And I think that's part of the kind of energy of the brand, actually.
No, it's so true. And I do a lot of writing. It's the same kind of thing, and I write content kind of every morning, and it's like there's a book by this comedian called Jerry Seinfeld. It's like, is this anything? And you basically, you know, you fight. Look, comedians go up on stage and loads of the jokes are absolutely awful, but then they get that one silver bullet, and it's like bosh. But I think you've got to fall in love with all the you know, almost the lead bullets that lead you to the silver bullet. And because when you find that silver bullet, it's like, as you said, like just it's like a shot of adrenaline straight into the synapses.
Exactly.
No, I absolutely love that, and I think, yeah, we were like that a lot at Manulife at the beginning, but as the business is scaled, we're having to, you know, force ourselves to do less better. But you know, it's different. There's more than one. Different beast, completely.
It's a different beast, exactly. I mean, you know, I would imagine in the grocery sector, and also, you know, I mean, it is a completely different beast. And I think that, you know, that is the one thing with Mob, is that like it is quite broad. You know, it's a media platform, and as a result of that, I think it does allow us to kind of branch out. But, you know, I mean, you know, our experience of grocery was, you know, an absolute horror show. We came out with the Mob lens, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, what's your favorite failure that has then taught you a bloody good lesson that set you up for success?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably the Mob lens was like the biggest public failure. And I still really believe this, is, you know, like our business model is brands pay to feature in our videos so we can show their products to the mob. It makes sense, you know, there's obviously value in the mob seeing these videos as other brands paying for them. So it follows that, why do we not just create our own grocery range, whether that be spice blends or our own olive oil or our own salt or whatever it is, and, you know, push it to the mob, because, you know, there's a market there who follow our stuff and would, you know, potentially want to go and buy those products. And so, yeah, I mean, it would have been beginning of 2019, I think, or it was actually end of 2018 when I had the idea for the blends. I still don't think that there are any particularly delicious blends out there. I find Bart's aren't that delicious, and I'd say they're the most premium of them. I'm sure actually the market's category's come on a long way since I really last looked at it. But at least when I was looking at the category, there was Bart, there was Schwartz, there was Own Label. Obviously, I know there's Spice Tailor now, but they were just kind of just on the up at that point. And I sort of thought we could improve on taste, but our big thing is that we're going to be able to put a mob sticker on it, basically, and that is going to be the differentiator, and, you know, that's going to be the thing that's going to pull the young audience to those products in retail. And so we spent 7 months developing the recipes with this guy called Ketan Joshi in Reading, in a kind of industrial unit in Reading. So we were going down there and testing the recipes. We spent about 5 months on the packaging, which I was completely OCD about and like fixated on it being completely perfect with black lids and a glass container, and spent all this energy and effort and money. I think we probably plunged about 15k into the idea in total, which even, you know, now is expensive, but like back then was really expensive for us. And then actually Stu was sort of my mentor for this. And he, you know, in return for a promise of content, you know, featuring Manny Lives, me and Stu met, you know, a few times, and he connected me with Laura Davis, who is like a kind of brand consultant and like some, you know, has some,
he's legend
in the retail
yeah.
grocery game, crazy black book of contacts. And she got all the meetings, we went and met with all the retail, and it was the same thing from each and every one. It was, you know, we love Mob, we love the Mob thinking about grocery, but there is nothing in this product that even either looks different to what's out there. Essentially, it's a glass container with a see-through wrap that, you know, says Mob, but it could just as easily say Bart, and it's got a, you know, a black lid. And they all just said no over the course of like 3 weeks. And, you know, there was a part of me that was like, you know, let's redo this, let's redo the packaging, let's like do this now. And, you know, Laura was, you know, it was like, you know, we've got to strike while the iron's hot, and like they're all interested, but like, let's just change it around a little bit. And I just thought, you know, this hasn't worked. We need to go back to the drawing board. We came at this all wrong. We came at this thinking that we'd be able to barge in with the Mob brands, and that would be enough. And it absolutely wasn't. And, you know, that's what I admire. So as a media person, I admire, like, I think like Manny is just like, when I think of like a real entrepreneur and like a real business, I think of like pure products. I always sort of like slightly I don't know what, I just think there's something like so fundamentally like entrepreneurial about like creating an incredible product that people, it's the essence of like being an entrepreneur, I'd say. And I feel like Mob's yet to like, we've never like really monetized our audience like directly. It's brands paying to sponsor the videos to the audience. We don't have a direct financial relate other than the books really, but we don't really own those products. So I'm in total admiration of, you know, you guys and the other guys, you know, the other kind of young startups in the grocery space. Because I mean, for us, it was just a huge flop, but definitely a real learning lesson, a real lesson. So,
and what would you say the one or two lessons were from that?
I don't know, if you're in media or if you're an influencer or a chef or a food creator, don't be arrogant about like the weight of your name and your brand. And, you know, like, although you might have 1 million followers, actually you need a product that is in and of itself different and unique and stands apart from the rest. And potentially, if you're in media, enjoy it and don't get into the hellhole scape that is grocery.
Yeah, no, and it's as you say, I think it's a tough, like, I think the tangibility of a product is what you say there about, you know, it being proper like entrepreneurial, if you want to put it in those brackets. But I think as we move today, it's more about media, being an entrepreneur online, having a platform, like that's where it's fundamentally moving to. Do you think you'd ever have another foray into grocery if you believe that true entrepreneurialism is in like in a physical product?
I mean, it's definitely something that we're thinking about. I think we're thinking we've got a project running at the moment that's much more, we're thinking more like e-com at the moment. So we've got some merch that we're kind of looking to push out. It's firstly it's going to start as t-shirts, but I think that there could be an interesting idea with like aprons and oven gloves, Mob branded, but more e-com side. I think I was so fixated on getting something into retail, getting something into the supermarkets, but I think no, I definitely think that there's a place for Mob products. So we're thinking first about aprons and oven gloves. We're sort of looking into the recipe box category a bit at the moment as well. And so no, I do. But I think I will definitely take those lessons that we learned from the blends, because I mean they were a shit show, and it, you know, completely opened my eyes to what would actually be needed if we were going to get it right.
I do love how with this kind of constant ideas you can churn out, you have this ability to separate yourself from them now, and I think that gives you real like power, because you just see them as learning nuggets almost, versus inextricably intertwining your self-worth to it. It's like just completely futile. So I think that's insane. Right, where do I want to go to next? So what I do find really interesting now, the mob has gone from, you know, yourself and Rupert banging out these videos on the weekend, and like just this culture of hustle that you know, you are a hustler in many ways, not to go, you know, like that, but it's insane. So you've built this team of 15, and they all feel very, this again sounds wanky, but like on brand. And it's something we talk a lot about at Money Life. When people come into Money Life, you've got to like, are they on brand? And you know, they've got to be a foodie, they've got to work hard. Like you kind of know in your gut whether they fit straight away. Now, you know, Seema, Sophie, Lucas, some of these guys I've seen like on your page, they all feel mob, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there any like specific interview questions you ask that, like, when you ask that question, like, Bosh, that really helps us decide?
Oh God, I mean, hiring is like the big sort of thing at the moment for us, and what I seem to spend like 90% of my time talking about hiring and personnel. I think that there's like we definitely look to like connect with people on like a conversational level in the interview, and if things remain very formal and kind of answer response, we'll often kind of get off the call and sort of feel we're not really sure if there's a massive connection there. I think like I always try and determine, you know, the big thing for me is like hard work, and like the thing I really look for are people. So I think that comes out, you know, the thing with Sophie and Seema and Lucas is that, you know, they're all on brand and they all love food, but the real connecting thread is that they're all just like, they're intensely passionate, which means that they want to put they're all into it all the time. And I think as a startup, especially a startup working remotely right now, that it's crucial to find that people who are completely invested in the brand and like the direction and the vision. You know, we can't sustain, you know, whereas like a Heinz or a Unilever are able to sustain people who like, you know, it's 9 to 5. They don't really care about their job that much, but like they kind of do an okayish job. Like as a startup, we just literally cannot sustain people like that. We can't continue running with people like that on our team. So yeah, I think that we look to kind of like hone in on a connection in our interviews with them, and like try and turn it into more of a conversation and gauge their passion for what they'll be doing. And, you know, like, yeah, exactly. I guess gauge their passion for what they'll be doing and try and pick up on that, and that like excitement and energy that we all have within the business, trying to make sure that anyone coming in like just loves what they're going to be doing. And you know, hopefully if that is the case and you bring them in, then it's going to be, you know, a match made in heaven. So
yeah, because I think passion is like passion is the foundation of hard work, because when you're super passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work. And then, you know, suddenly before you know, you've done it may be a, you know, 14-hour day or whatever, but it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's, if you get that passion part right, then the rest kind of follows suit. And are there like specific, like, do you ask them like what their favorite food is, or like what are some of the questions, or is it more of a conversation?
Yeah, I guess it's more of a conversation. I mean, I'm like very disorganized, I think, in the way that I think and I approach things. I think I've got ADD. And
Same.
Michael, our ops director, who's always on the interviews as well, at least for the kind of senior team members, he's much more, you know, he was a head boy, so he's like proper, proper organized and methodical. So I think I kind of often, I'll often just come into an interview with like a new idea that I'm thinking about for the business, or a new route that might somehow like play into what their role might be, and I just see how they'll react like on their feet to like, a new hypothetical situation, and kind of gauge their like, quick fire response to something. So no, we don't have any kind of like mob interview questions. Maybe we should. Again, like hiring and bringing on new staff is something that, especially given the fact that the oldest person in our business is 29, it's like something that we're all learning on. There isn't really anyone kind of senior who has been through multiple hiring rounds and drives. So I think that's the hiring process is definitely a sort of a learning curve for us.
But it seems to be working. So like why again, outside looking in, and this is why, but it seems to be working.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I guess isn't that the kind of like this conversation here is like the crux of maybe sometimes what's wrong with social media, in that like I'm glad that it has that, and it is working by and large. We've got a team of 15 who are well-oiled, working well together. It's a well-oiled process, but. Of course, we've had people who've come in and they haven't passed their probation. We've had people who've come in for 6 months working on a new kind of business direction and it hasn't worked, and we've had to part ways. So there have definitely been kind of like, examples where it hasn't worked as well. And so I'm really in the process with Michael of trying to just iron out that onboarding process to make sure that we're able to kind of really spot right at the beginning the Lucases and the Seamers and the Sophies, and try and kind of make that a consistent thing across the board. It's really difficult. It's all hiring, and personnel is all I talk to other founders of like businesses of a similar size about. I think that kind of sort of like 5 to like 20, 25 employee mark is like that kind of size is, the transformation of the business, where it suddenly becomes from, it turns from just being about, you and like, 1 or 2 key team members to like this big team effort. I feel like every business goes through that kind of phase where they have to kick off the stabilizers and turn it into more of a formal process. So we're right in the heart of that right now, kind of finding our feet as a bigger team. And yeah.
Likewise, and this, you've segued perfectly onto my next question, Ben, so thank you. But you've got this kind of like, how do you as a founder cultivate and nourish this sense of hustle, or like, can-do attitude as you scale to 15? But more importantly, like, how do you do it when everyone's on Zoom like that? Or like you're doing it remotely? It's how do you do that?
I'm very open about like the wins and losses publicly with the team. So like we have a big like mob daily Slack channel where, we're constantly posting, either big sales or like losses, or like, shit, we've all been locked out of the Instagram, or like, oh God, we're getting trolled on this post. And there's this very like everyone, and also because, even though we're a bigger team now, like everyone almost at this point still has like a touch point with one piece of content that goes out. Either they've cooked it, or they've written it onto the website, or they've taken a photograph for it, or they've edited it, or they've sold it to a client. Like everyone has a touch point. So I think like an openness and like a transparency within the team, like everyone being involved in the wins and the losses, I think is definitely a way that, I feel like the whole team are very aware about like the state of the, if cash flow is running low one month, I'll like have to message and say, stop buying lovely new furniture from John Lewis for the studio. And like everyone will like see that message and like kind of know that we're having a bit of a down month, and everyone will kind of be aware of those like ups and downs. So I do think that I can't speak for the, the team, and especially the newer members of the team, but I do think that at least everyone's kind of really aware of like the kind of, you know, the core of the business and the ups and the downs. I think it is really difficult though. It's really difficult, especially on Zoom and Slack and digital, and, you know, so much kind of nuance and relationship and communication is lost over those digital means. And so yeah, no, I guess it's just, you know, I guess our approach is just trying to kind of loop everyone in and get everyone feeling involved and included in like all the processes and all the ups and the downs. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's the only way you can do it. And as I said, like we're in the kind of going through the same process. We were a team of 6 at the beginning of first lockdown last March. It's now coming up to, I think, 11, soon to be more. And it's like, it's the hardest thing in the world. I take my hat off to Stu for doing it. Like he has, you know, I think it's showing people the ups and the downs, and that immediately gets them brought in, I think, is the kind of way we're doing it. And, you know, as a founder, like, again, outside looking in, you look fearless. Like you've got this ability just to do everything. And one thing I did want to, you know, touch upon is, you know, lots of founders and listeners to this podcast are going to have to do scary things to propel themselves forward, right? And there was, I think it was a Sky interview in May 2020, and I would be absolutely cacking myself to go on a Sky interview, like full on touching cloth. Like do you get scared? One, and I suppose 2 is like, how do you use fear to propel you forward?
God, definitely. I mean, I think public speaking, and like, I remember the first time I did like a big talk at Oxford Brookes Business School, and there was like 200 people, and I was doing a kind of talk for them. It was me and the founder of Unilads, and I took a hip flask with just neat vodka, and I drank like 4 big lugs of vodka before I got on to like calm my nerves. I get real nerves, like I get real adrenaline the moment before I get into something that's like quite public, and then the moment I'm in it, I guess that's a good thing that I think about, is always I have like the same reaction every time. I get this like heart beating, like animalistic kind of adrenaline fear before it's always before public things. So Sky News, exactly, or doing a talk, or I don't know, having a difficult conversation with an employee. I always get the same like heart racing fear, animalistic fear type feeling, and then always 15 seconds into the ice being broken in any of those incidents, my nerves calm, and I am able to just kind of get into what I'm doing and be present and like do it. So I think I 100% have that fear, but I also have I now wouldn't drink before going on, because I have like a knowledge that I will be okay 10, 15 seconds in. And I think ultimately, it's different, it's the same feeling as the fear that you had before going into like your Spanish oral exam for your GCSEs. But the difference is you actually know what you're talking about now. When you're going into the Spanish oral, you're actually shitting yourself, because you're not going to be able to pass, and it's going to be terrifying and horrible. But I think, something that I sort of connect with, 10, 15 seconds, I think probably the thing that I connect with is just that I have an absolute knowledge and understanding of what I'm talking about. I'm never winging it or kind of bullshitting. I know it, as much as I know myself. It is me. It is it's what I do. So yeah.
No, I completely agree. And I think a phrase I say to myself before I do scary things, whether it's pitching to a buyer, or I did like a bread and jam talk last year, I was absolutely cacking myself. I just say, fear equals growth. And I just, it's no matter win or lose, the more you get used to shitting yourself, the further you're going to go. And you've got to absolutely. There's a Dr. Dre documentary, I think, the Defiant Ones, and the guy says on that, the guy who built Apple, Johnny Iovine, I think his name is, he says fear, he used to think fear is headwind, but fear is tailwind. You know, fear propels you forward. It gives you, and I think that's firstly, that's good to know, because again, outside looking in, I think that's kind of the central theme of this. It looks like you've just got this ability to not be scared. But no, that's, I think listeners will find that really powerful. You know, just get used to getting scared. It propels you forward. Right, conscious of your time, so we will.
Don't worry about that.
Oh, really? Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. We'll keep going. Yeah, no, this is wicked, because sometimes some guests have got like start off immediately.
No.
Awesome. So where are we? So in terms of like building an audience now, you know, I was kind of doing some prep before this, and I think there was an interview you did. Is it young people doing amazing things, or young people doing things? And you said, there was a quote you said in there, you know, I believe that if I build it, they will come. Now, you know, people say that with content, it's all about consistency. It's all about, you know, that's kind of the only, or the top line advice, right? You've built this Megatron platform in the mob, but what are the 1 or 3 things people should be doing to build up an audience that isn't just posting consistently?
I would say our TikTok experience would be the perfect way to answer this.
Right.
I think it holds true across all social media platforms. And I mean, it's just literally a perfect example. So we built the Facebook when it was just me in my house with the raw idea, making raw content, and it felt very raw and it felt very real. And the Instagram built off the back of that, and we have this very kind of smooth content machine now that works really well for Facebook and Instagram. And I think, you know, sometimes, especially to new viewers, it might seem almost a bit too smooth, and that like the, you know, the rawness and the realness can sometimes be lost in the process. I think that has happened to an extent with some of our content on Instagram and on Facebook. And we were using that content to try and build out our TikTok audience. And we were posting our super high production value videos where in our mind, we were like, God, you know, if everyone's liking these like crappy phone shot videos on TikTok, surely they're going to love these like beautiful videos shot on a Canon C300 in a beautiful lit studio and all this kind of stuff. And we'd uploaded 25 videos and we had 5,000 followers, and it was embarrassing, really. And I'd had a few beers one night, and I was a bit drunk actually, and I just was looking at the TikTok, and I was just thinking, this is really diabolical. And so I just deleted every single video from it in one fell swoop. It all went, a couple of client ones, a couple of ones of me in there, ones of the food team in there. They all went, even ones that had, some of them had like 300,000 views. And the next day I rang up Sophie, I had a food, and I said, I'd love it if you and Seema could get into the studio and film, you know, 6 recipes that we all love personally, and we just do it on our phone. I've got someone who can edit them, who's like good at doing these like little phone edits. I want us to do voiceovers over the top. I want it to be really personal. I want to like introduce ourselves to TikTok, specifically say who we are and tell our story. And we did it, and the first video was a chorizo carbonara, and I got absolutely rinsed for my accent in it, but it went like Megatron viral. We got 3.2 million views. We got 130,000 followers in one day off the back of the video from 5,000 followers. And then, you know, we've been uploading these other videos, and they're all doing not quite as well as that first one, but they're doing, you know, getting really good solid views, and the followers have gone up. We've just hit 170,000 followers on TikTok, which, you know, let's say as a month-long project, starting from 5,000 to 170,000, you know, for me, the learning is so completely obvious and singular. It's to succeed on like social media and to build a following, not through hacks, not through giveaways or paid partnerships or buying your followers or any of that. the key and most important thing is just total vulnerability, honesty, transparency, and like realness. And and that comes down to, and people can sense it. And like, you might think that they can't, and you might think that, like, if you do a beautiful shoot in an amazing studio with an amazing photographer, an amazing stylist, that everyone's going to respond really well to it. But like, at the end of the day, people can tell like how real or not the content is, and how much it reflects the brand behind it. And people just connect with stories and like realness and like honesty, and like also really crucially like vulnerability. And I think when I say vulnerability, I mean like they connect with people who like sort of make themselves vulnerable by like opening themselves up and being open, and they want to get behind that and support it. And that is just what happened on our TikTok, like in the most pure, perfect sense. And that's what my advice to anyone would be. And I recently had a guy who rang me up. He's one of the founders of a food truck called Babette Brothers, and they make these incredible kebabs. And he was asking me about him and his brother have now come up with this like range of like sustainable packaged gourmet freezer meals, and their Instagram is filled with this like stunning photography that's like shot by a proper photographer with a proper food stylist, and their engagement's pants. And he rang me up and he was like, what do we do to like, what can we do to sort of ramp this up in an organic way? And I was just like, just try you and your brother cooking these meals, get the plate of food outside into natural light, get a nice iPhone, make sure that the camera isn't blurred, take a nice photograph of it naturally on a plate, not styled, and upload it. And I guarantee you'll perform 8 times better than, a kind of a professionally shot thing. So that would be my advice, really. Kind of just don't overthink it, keep it really honest and personal. And that would be my kind of recipe for success.
So vulnerability is a superpower almost. And I think one of the good things to come from this pandemic is, because everyone has just been so emotionally fucked by it, is people are now, it's okay to be vulnerable on social media. And it's probably one of the only good things is people are now allowed to just, not everything has to be polished, because nothing in our whole life has been unpolished and just ravaged, to be honest, this last year. So no, that's amazing. And then, so we've got, say, vulnerability and kind of authenticity and realness is the key to, posting content. There's an article that I absolutely love, and I'm kind of asking you now for advice with growing this podcast, I suppose. There's an article by Kevin Kelly, which is 1,000 True Fans. And it's basically, you build that first 1,000, diehard, almost like mob-like following, treat them and build a connection with them. They'll then tell 10 of their friends, and before you know it, it starts to scale. For listeners or for me trying to get to my say 1,000 True Fans, like what other than posting content, like how do you kind of connect with the mob? Are you having literal conversations with them? Have you got Slack groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think one element of our Instagram is that it is sort of a conversation. We get probably like 100, 150 DMs every day, which are a mixture of people cooking our dishes, or people asking questions, recipes, people giving suggestions. On the Instagram and on the socials, there's very open conversation and communication. At the beginning, I set up groups. I set up Facebook groups. One of the sort of like the key ideas I had, someone told me this when I was drunk at a party, and it was the best thing I ever got told. I was like, how do I get the word out about mob right at the beginning, before anyone knows about it or cares, or it's much easier? How do I get people to start knowing about it and caring? And this person came up to me and he was like, use your friends like ruthlessly. And your friends are literally people in your life that want to do anything to support you, and use that basically. Create groups. So he was like, create specific groups on Facebook. And so I created 3 groups. One was called Mob Kitchen Best Friends, one was called Mob Kitchen Family, and one was called Mob Kitchen The Mob. And that was like 600 of my friends on Facebook. The best friends was about 70 friends, and the Mob Kitchen Family was my brothers and my cousins all added like 10 of their friends. And I brought them into the story and like the journey of Mob before launch about 3 months in. And I shared early content with them. And, you know, some people ask like, well, you know, did you have to pay them, or did you have to kind of incentivize them in any way? And just looping people in and making people feel like they're part of something, I think like is so crucial in like getting the word out and getting them to be invested in it. I think that there's such a temptation to have this mentality of like, especially at the beginning of like, I'm going to make this thing happen, and then I'm going to kind of show my family and my friends what I've created on my own. And again, it's sort of that vulnerability thing. It's sort of like saying like, if you don't help me, I'm fucked, and I need your help to get it off the ground. I need your support. And it was, so yeah, I mean, in those early days, those groups for me were absolutely crucial. And now, you know, we still kind of use that approach with kind of new projects. We've got this Mob Kitchen group on Facebook. Admittedly, we only created it about a couple of months ago, but we've now got this kind of group that we're going to start using as a focus group to start talking about new ideas. And that the idea for that group sort of sprung out of the original Mob Group's idea, but actually also recently we've built this, this is not really released yet, but we've built this huge app. It's a new brand. It's called Peckish. And it is basically like a kind of a social media for food, photo, and recipe sharing. It's like a mix between TikTok, Instagram, Mob Kitchen, Reddit. It's this, I mean, I've been building it for 2 years with my brother, and we've got these 13 groups on Facebook that are called Peckish Insiders, and each group has 100 members in it that we pulled from the Mob Kitchen page. And we've been in an open communication with these groups for about a year, literally posting photos of me and my brother at like 10 p.m. sitting in a Chinese restaurant, like working on our laptops, trying to build, you know, on the designs and all this kind of thing. We've looped them in like right from the start, and we're bringing beta testers onto the app now. And like the response that we're getting already of just people wanting to come onto the app and spend half an hour, like investing their time into giving us like proper robust feedback so we can like improve on it and get it completely ready before we go live to market, is huge. And it's all because of that, creating like little clusters of kind of, you know, either they're little clusters of diehard fans, or even if, you know, I think it's important to talk about the stage before that. And like, you know, we had 1,000 people that we could drive to Peckish from Mob, but at the beginning of a business idea, there aren't even 1,000 people that know about the idea. So I think at that point, I turn to your mates, turn to your university contemporaries, turn to your colleagues, and like bring them in and create that initial group.
No, that's amazing. You've built the 1,000 true fans there, and with this Peckish, they get informed. I think I need to create either a Facebook group for Hungry, because at the minute I'm doing a lot of I want to know whether my questions are resonating with listeners, and you know, I try my best to almost put myself in the shoe of the listener. But what I really want is to get to a situation where, like, okay, I'm interviewing Ben Liebus. What do you guys want to know? And you know, and cultivate a sense of hungry fans or listeners who, you know, it's a win-win situation. It makes a better interview for you, for me, and for the audience. No, that's amazing, and super insightful. And I think kind of a crux of this interview is being vulnerable and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Right, kind of want to finish on a few quick fire questions, which are like really stoking my curiosity before I came into this. So the first is we've done a kind of collaboration on those peanut bacony noodles, which are absolutely banging. You did with Manny Life. Those are fucking awesome. You've done hundreds and hundreds of recipes. Like, what is your favorite Mob recipe of all time? And and song to go with it. And then I kind of, once we've answered that, I want to know some context around it.
Oh God, can I just fire a few at you?
Fire a few at me. Go away, mate.
There are recipes that all have their own meaning and like place. I mean, our first recipe that ever got any serious traction in terms of views, so I think it ended up on like 600,000 views on Facebook. So it went like mini viral, was our healthy chicken gyros. I think the price for it was like $9.68 or maybe $9.58. The song on it was That Game You're Playing by Poldor, and it's this like really like high energy song. And that for me is like just like the iconic mob recipe, like the original. And so that recipe I love, and is such a kind of key part of the mob story.
And when you posted it, where were you when you posted that? Like, did it get virality straight away? And you're like, oh my god, or...
Well, that's funny enough. When I was looking through my old messages with Tommy, and I'd sort of forgotten about this, but in those first 4 months, I was seeing these messages where like every time I'd post, I would message my mates. I remember it. I'd message my mates and be like, I've just posted it, like it's going to be huge, like this is happening, like I think that this is going to go viral, it's going to pop off. I mean, all of it, I was just sitting, at home, just like tracking the views in my bedroom, excitedly seeing the comments roll in and the views rack up, watching it over and over and over again. I'm obsessed with our content. I think it is like, with the music, I just love it. I find it so visually satisfying. So I've watched all of our videos on loop probably about 100 times. I'm like die-hard passionate about our content. So yeah, chicken gyros. Our first ever recipe to go properly viral was our homemade doner kebab. So that was, you get basically just make a kind of a ball of spiced lamb mince, wrap it in tin foil, whack it in the oven, and then, cut off shavings of doner meat. And so that one, I'd say like my, great lockdown recipe one, we're living with my girlfriend, we've been making aglio e olio a lot. So just kind of oil, good olive oil, garlic, chili flakes, parsley, lemon juice, and spaghetti or linguine. And that's just a beautiful dish, very simple, which I love and is on the mob platform now. So a lot of the recipes are quite personal on the mob platform. Those ones I have, I have a real connection with and love.
No, that's amazing. I think it's the pivotal ones, the chicken gyros. Like that will be your favorite dish for the rest of your life now.
Exactly.
Amazing. And then another, I think it's Young People Doing Things podcast says, you said always listen to advice from friends and family, but feel free to ignore. I think is a quote. I hope you haven't butchered that. What's the best?
I haven't, yeah.
No, okay, amazing. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and what's the worst piece of advice as well that you've just said sack that off to?
God, I don't know. I mean, I think bring it right back to the start, all around the name, which was something that I've got these lists on my phone of like different names to Mob Kitchen, and it went on for months. I just could not land on it. I was so fixated on whether to give it because the whole kind of first premise was feed four for under a tenner, and so like my big kind of mental quandary was like, do I call it something as specific as like feed four for under tenner, or do I give it more of an umbrella name and have the feed four for under a tenner? It's like those kind of now seemingly completely irrelevant conversations that were such a big part of my life for 2 months. And I eventually landed on Z Chef because I was going to be the chef of Generation Z. And my mum, we were driving together in the car, and it was about a month before launch, and my mum said, I just think Z Chef sounds a bit like a weird Lebanese restaurant, and this just doesn't really represent the brand. And she completely called me out on the name, and I was quite set on choosing it. And I'd sort of like made peace of the fact that that was going to be the name of the business, and I totally agreed with her. And so that was probably the best bit of advice I was given about the name. And we together actually came up with the name Mob Kitchen in the car, actually, when she told me not to go with Z Chef. We wanted to come up with a name that felt more incorporative. Kitchen, a group of people. We thought People's Kitchen, that was already taken. We played on the word people and we got to Mob. And then probably the worst advice I was ever given was I sort of like put Mob Kitchen out to my groups and said, you know, what do you think of this name? And like 90% of people said it's a shit name. Drop Mob Kitchen.
Amazing.
I don't know what it means. I don't know what it is. And that I think was a key example for me of like, send something out to your mates, make sure you get the feedback. But if you, at the end of the day, you need to be the one that makes the decision. And like, you know, whenever you ask people for advice, that I know you did with your, with the color background or like the logo thing. And I was like, that's a really brave thing to do, because you're going to get like 50 comments talking about, the logo that you put out on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and they're all going to be saying different things. And sometimes, I think that can actually be like super unhelpful, because it like leaves you in a position at the end of it. You're like, what do I focus on? Where do I go? You know, what route do I take? So I think it's about like asking for that, but sort of, I guess, being sort of tunnel vision in what you're thinking and like being selective about the bits of advice that you listen to.
For sure. And you were the one who said put it in orange, and I can't thank you enough for that, because it's like as soon as I saw that, and then I was gonna, in my head I was like, oh, should I do another, you know, which orange do you like? And I was like, no, fuck it, like that's it, bosh, like food and drink to make you think hungry. And I think, you know, a lot of it is following your gut. Like, you know, I think the Mob, you've got to follow what the gut in here is telling you to do, because exactly. otherwise you end up just kind of losing losing your way if you follow what other people say. 3 more questions. What is your like, do you have, lots of entrepreneurs talk about this like morning routine, or like, you know, kind of structure to their day? What is your day like? Do you literally get up and just go, or do you have specific ways to sort of step back, or how do you do it?
I'm quite a late starter. My girlfriend also loves to lion, so I'm normally out of bed at like 8:30, and I get up, have coffee, and then I find that most of my day at the moment, Monday to Friday, is taken up with like I find that I spend 90% of my time in response mode. So responding to questions from the team, responding to emails, responding to like content checks, responding to any issues or like problems. It's like throughout the day, I don't really find that I have any time to kind of actually think about slightly broader strategy things or new ideas, or try and like step out of the process a bit and just think a bit more top line. So I do find that at the moment, my days are quite kind of like reactive. You know, I'm loving this. This is like genuinely the first like hour and a half I've spent in a long time, sort of like just doing something completely and utterly invested in that one thing without a mind on anything else. So yeah, at the moment, I mean, there's just so much going on. I'm sort of just all day is just like, you know, phone and Slack and responses. And then I think I'm way better in the evenings as a worker. So often it's in the evenings that I will have longer chats with Joe and have longer chats with Michael about like more of like the general state of things and like different directions and different moods. And so, yeah, I think that's probably really what my day-to-day looks like. Like 9 to 5 is like kind of just like, you know, that, and then sort of 5 to like 7, 8 is like long calls with Michael and Joe and my dad, and you know, actually spending time sort of thinking about things once everything's kind of quietened down.
And I do the opposite. So I'm up at like literally crack of dawn, have that period of just, and then it's like, look, now it's, I think everyone in a startup is reactive. I think bullshit advice is like, you know, don't be reactive. Like, you know, that's just not going to happen. Like it's reactive, and it's always reactive, and there's no two ways about it. But, you know, cultivating that time of the day, whether it be in the evening or the morning, to have that space is essential. And then, you know, you've published books. I've actually, you know, I've got one here. I think the baked beans recipe, like a Boston beans in here, is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Are there any like either business books or cookbooks, or like even artistic books, I suppose, that you'd really recommend?
I'm really not a big reader. I feel like embarrassed to admit that. I read about 5 books a year, and it's when I'm on holiday, and it's like the only time I'm able to really switch off. I'm just not a big reader, so I just don't think I can really help the answer. The only thing I read is I read crappy airport thrillers, because it's what I mean, the thing I love about them is it just allows me to completely and utterly get out of my mental headspace, and around work, which is something that I really struggle with doing. Like, I find it really difficult to like totally switch off.
Have you ever burnt out in the last 4 years? Have you ever?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Just like, you know, really, that was just, I don't know what, you know, in particularly stressful moments over particularly stressful projects where my mind fixates on things like tiny details and like conversations. And, you know, I find, you know, when things aren't going well with the business, or like there's a kind of a business conversation that isn't going well, and, you know, I completely one big lesson for me is like, as a worrier and someone who gets caught up on the details, always address something head on. Don't let it sit. Don't think like, oh, I'm going to see how this plays out. Just like always be direct and address it, so you don't have to like deal with worrying about it or kind of like thinking about it, you know, in the long term. But no, I mean, I think it's natural. You know, I joke, but it's like every, you know, on Sundays I kind of like have this thing of like, we're going to battle tomorrow. Like, it is like there's like so much like constantly that it does just feel like it is this like reactive thing. And like, you know, of course that takes a toll, and there are times when over a particularly stressful period it gets too much. And you know, one of the things that getting back to Oxford and being with my parents and putting my phone away and just switching off, you know, for me is a really good way of kind of like calming and steadying.
And do you work? You don't work weekends now, or do you still do that? Or like Sundays are like you in the dressing room. Like,
ready,
in the keepy uppies beforehand. Like, how do you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like work. I'm always thinking about work, always. So I really don't think that I ever really, you know, everything. I feel like unless I'm like away on holiday, and I do switch off much more than I used to, but I mean, no, I'm not sort of sitting on my emails and like, you know, on Slack looking at like messages and content all Sunday. But, you know, I'm always thinking about work, you know, always wanting to pick up the phone and call Joe or Michael with new ideas, you know, all the time. So
amazing. Final question. So we don't know where Mob's going to go in the next kind of couple of years or whatever, but what advice would you give to the Ben Liebus in say 10 years time? If say you're 10 years ahead looking down, would it be, what would that advice be? It's quite a good lens.
So am I giving him advice in 10 years?
No, so you're Ben Liebus in 10 years, and you're giving yourself your present Ben Liebus advice. So for example, mine would be Stan, slow down, would be mine. Just as an example.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's a good one. I think that, you know, one that I'm constantly trying to, it's really difficult to do this, but trying to say is, like, just enjoy what you have right now and stop thinking about the fact that your like next direct competitor is like X amount bigger than you, and stop thinking about like the next milestone and like the next thing. Like, enjoy what you have. You know, whenever anyone, you know, if I bump into an old like acquaintance or like, you know, mate at a pub or whatever, you know, and they're like, God, you know, Mob's incredible and it's doing so well and like, you know, it's such a big success. Like, it just literally goes over my head and I don't hear any of it. All I'm focused on is like the next thing. And I would say that would be the one bit of advice. And I try so much to really sort of like get into that mindset of, you know, it doesn't always have to be about like pushing and growth and like all of it. But I mean, it's like the most difficult thing ever. And I'd say I'm like awful at actually sort of like taking that advice on board. But that's what I try to do, and try as much to be sort of like content and in the moment as possible.
Amazing. Ben, that was absolutely awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to just hit